Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. At Sunshine Parenting, I write, research, speak, and interview podcast guests on the topics of parenting, summer camp, and happiness. In episode 14 of the podcast, I'm talking with Catherine Pearlman, a social worker who's worked with many families, and her website, thefamilycoach.com, led to her writing the book, Ignore It: How Selectively Looking the Other Way Can Decrease Behavioral Problems and Increase Parenting Satisfaction. Thank you so much for being on with me today, Catherine.
It's good to be here.
So can you tell our listeners just a little bit about your background and the book you've written?
Sure. So I've been a licensed clinical social worker for over 22 years, and my mission is to help people enjoy their kids more. And it started out when I was a social worker making home visits to teen moms so that they could avoid losing their kids for child abuse or neglect. But as I had my own kids and moved to the suburbs and kind of changed jobs, I realized that there were a lot of people who were struggling with parenting. They weren't likely to abuse their kids or neglect them, but they weren't enjoying parenting because there were so many behaviors that were coming up for their kids that were really taking a toll on the parent and the relationship with the kids. And so I started the Family Coach, which is really my practice where I go into the homes and I help people with everyday parenting issues. And I kept seeing, no matter what the parent was calling me for, there was one piece of advice I was giving everybody, and that was to ignore it. So, someone would say, like, what should I do about my kid who won't stay in timeout? And I would say, ignore it. What should I do about my teen who's pissed at me and, curses at me? And I would say, ignore it. What should I do? All these things, just ignore it. And I could see the profound impact it was having. Parents felt so relieved that they didn't have to address every bit of bad behavior. And then the behavior would go away because it was no longer being reinforced. And so basically I put it all down in a book. All the kind of things that I would go into the home and talk to parents about is basically what I, used to write the book.
It's really phenomenal. And as I was telling you before we started the official recording, when I saw the title, I thought, okay, this sounds like a really good information and parents really need it. But I didn't think it would be as applicable in my own life since my youngest kids are now 13 and 16. But I found it really applicable. Why don't you talk first just about a few of the key ideas of Ignore It? Because it's more than just ignoring the behaviors you don't want to see your kids do.
Exactly. I mean, really, the whole idea is that when kids have their behavior reinforced, if there's any kind of benefit or reward for their behavior, they're likely to repeat the behavior. So if they get a lot of attention from whining, complaining, or they get a rise out of us for pushing our buttons, they're going to continue with that behavior. So the idea is to find the behaviors that were rewarding that we would like to go away, like whining, complaining, tantruming, negotiating, all of those things, and selectively ignore them. So when our kids start whining or complaining or arguing with us after we've already said no and we've explained why, then we ignore their behavior. And as soon as they stop, we reengage them. It's very simple. And then instead of rewarding the behaviors we don't want to see, we have to really pay attention to our kids when they're doing things we want to see happen more often. Because again, if we provide the reward and benefit for those good behaviors, we're going to see those more often, and the things we don't want to see are going to kind of disappear.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny because that's the part, the reinforcing positive behaviors is what we've really been emphasizing at camp in our camp counselor training is, pointing out everything that they can find that kids are doing right, that they like, and really kind of identifying those behaviors, because a lot of times adults don't take the time to think about what is it that I want this kid to be doing. Instead, it's the focus is on what we don't want them to be doing. But once you know what you do want them to be doing, you can, reinforce that and really get it to happen more often.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, partly we don't let kids know what our expectations are. Like, what is the behavior we're looking for when we're going to the supermarket or restaurant or when we're traveling with the group at camp? We need to explicitly tell kids what we expect. And then we need to say, hey, good job. We need to give them a high five. We need a pat on the back. We need to, give a star or something special. And a lot of times parents, teachers, counselors say, why do I have to reward kids all the time for doing the things they have to do? And I think, well, it's nice in my adult life when I do something nice for someone and they say thank you. It's nice when I do a great job at work and my boss says, wow, you did a really great job. Like all of those things help motivate me to continue to do a good job. So if we're realistic, it's honestly, we all need that. And kids, we sometimes forget that they need that. And so we spend so much time with the no, please don't stop doing that. And we forget to really reinforce the things, the little things that we want to see. And honestly, like a high five is incredibly rewarding to a child. Like it seems so silly, even to adults, it's so powerful.
I know we do tons of those at camp, and thumbs up and just, it's awesome. Yeah, it's so true. Just that acknowledgement that we notice when they're doing good things is so important. And I think it gets by the wayside a lot. I feel like a lot of times, especially as kids get older in school and they have different struggles and different subjects, so much of parents' focus is often on the deficits instead of the strengths and the things that we see that are really great character traits in our kids. So it's so good when you step back and really focus on what you like. You have a part in your book where you talk about kind of some of the challenges of like parents working together and doing the same thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you've learned both in your practice and what you talk about in the book about kind of getting on the same page with this kind of stuff with your kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Parents did not grow up in the same home, so they have two very different experiences often of what it is to be a parent, for better or worse. And so then you take these two people who grew up very differently and you put them in the same house and you expect them to parent the same way. It's not going to work. But what happens is when parents aren't on the same page, kids use it to their advantage always. So they know exactly how to work the system, how to get mom and dad against each other and to basically get what they want or to get forgotten about while mom and dad are arguing over the little thing. And so what's interesting is that parents really do not need to be on the same page about everything. In fact, sometimes I think a little diversity in the way we parent our kids is a good thing. But there are certain things that have to be non-negotiable where mom and dad or both partners have to be on the same page. And if one starts to reinforce something, the other has to, stand by them. And you can disagree later. You can reevaluate it once the kids are in bed and kind of discuss how the situation went. But you kind of have to be on the same page, or again, the kids will use it against you, and then that's no fun for anybody.
Absolutely. I was thinking as I was reading that chapter, I was thinking too, it would be really good for parents to read your book together and then really talk about just whether it's one or two behaviors, even maybe just starting with one behavior that they are both on the same page that they don't want to see anymore. And then maybe also one or two things that they really want to promote and have happen more. So a good behavior that they both want to reinforce. So even if both parents are just really focused on, maybe it's tantrums or maybe it's the negotiating, if they are both focused at least on these same behaviors, at least that could be a start for kind of tackling those things.
I agree. And sometimes, when one parent says to the other parent, a suggestion about parenting, it can be very threatening. But when it comes from an outside source, sometimes it can be very mediating and parents can get on board without it feeling threatening. And also, if parents think of themselves as a team, so like there might be times where I get caught up in, arguing with one of my kids or something, and my husband might just kind of remind me, tap me on the shoulder. We now in our house, obviously we joke and he'll be like, ignore it. Even I get caught up sometimes and I'm like, hey, what am I doing? Yes, right. Ignore it. So I think if parents can see each other as a team and not one against the other, so that when they're not being their best parent self, they can tap out and be like, you know what? I got you on this one. Just take a second. I'm on it. Because, we don't all have the same weaknesses or vulnerabilities as our partners. And so sometimes what's driving me insane doesn't bother my husband at all, or vice versa. So we really are there for each other as a team. If I see him getting worked up and it's not bothering me at all, now I'm like, I got it. I'm on it, but in a supportive way.
Mm-hmm. That's something we really emphasize with our counselors as well, just the importance of you can't do this alone. You need the help of other adults. And so when you see someone who's struggling with a child or you are struggling, it's the best thing always to just say, hey, I need a little help here, or just have someone step in. And that's such an important thing because it makes this whole process so much more fun when you're not alone in it, because some of these things are really quite challenging to deal with our kids.
Well, I think that there's this impression that we have to be perfect as parents all the time. And I think it's the same for counselors who, are feeling like people are watching them and they're our bosses and sometimes they're our parents. And, it's impossible to be perfect and on your game all the time. You have to ask for help. You have to reassess yourself all the time. There are times I don't have a great day and I lay in bed at night. I'm like, where did I go wrong? So that I don't go wrong again tomorrow. Or what could I have done differently? Or where could I have asked for help? Or where could I have accepted help that was already offered? That sometimes I'm like, oh no, I got it. And I'm like, I don't got it. I should have accepted that ride for my kids, or, that invitation for dinner, because I could really use the help.
I know it's definitely a weird thing that all parents are kind of in our own silos a lot of the time, dealing with the same things, but not realizing that we all can be here more for each other. And it just makes it so much better when we reach out and offer help and accept it from other people.
And the funny thing is, I'm on the other side. So I go into parents' houses, I go in, I see everyone is dealing with something. There's no one that's got it like it's amazing. It's not how it looks on Facebook. Everybody really is going through something. They just don't talk about it, but I see it. So I know that everybody's going through stuff. It's just, it would be better for all kind of like, what, I'm having a tough day. Who's here for me? Who can feel me? Anyone around? Or you see someone else having a tough day and you reach out to them because, it's like I said, everyone's having it.
Right. Like there was one part of your book where you talk about the judgmental person who's saying something about your kid's tantrum about, oh, my kids never did that. And I thought instead just to say to that mom, hey, I've been there, you'll make it through.
Totally.
Just give them a little encourament. And it's so much nicer and saying, when my kids were little, we had this happen sometimes. That just would lighten someone's load for the day. So that's such an important point. So I wanted to just say, as I said, this book, I looked at it, the whole title is Ignore It, How Selectively Looking the Other Way Can Decrease behavioral problems and increase parenting satisfaction. And when I first saw the title, I thought, okay, this is going to be really good because I do think it's important not to get all caught up and overworked by our kids' somewhat normal sometimes behaviors and to just start ignoring things so they don't keep happening. But I didn't really think it was going to be personally applicable. And then as I'm reading it and kind of dealing with the start of school with my teenage boys, I started really noticing so many of the things that you talk about in there. And so for me and for any parent of teens, they have these moods. And so sometimes they're this really pleasant, great kid that kind of like what you remember from a few years ago. And then sometimes they're just really kind of surly, not very responsive. And it's been so interesting because I like to talk and engage and everything else, but it's been really helpful reminder to me when they're being surly or just not wanting to talk at breakfast. That's fine. I just drink my coffee and ignore it. And it's really made life so much better, realizing that I don't have to get them to engage or be happy every moment of the day. And so it's funny because even with teens, I think there's a lot we can ignore. What are you finding with your clients, with teenagers? What types of behaviors are they most needing to use Ignore It with?
Well, it's so funny because I purposely put on the cover of the book, good for like 2 to 18. And honestly, originally it was to 21, because I think that toddlers and teens are actually extremely similar. They both have this desire to be more independent than they're actually capable or ready for. And it's very frustrating. And that frustration causes a lot of unpleasant behavior. And so the behaviors look slightly different, but they're very, very similar. So for teens, you get a lot of disrespectful behavior, a lot of pushing buttons, a lot of negotiating, a lot of whining and complaining. And so what happens is parents think that they can talk their kids out of these things, or they can lecture it out of them, like tell them why they're being disrespectful so they won't do it next time. But the kid already knows they're being disrespectful. That's why they're doing it. They're angry and frustrated. They want you to be angry and frustrated too. So it's like as soon as you are angry and frustrated, they're like, well, that was effective. Now I know what to do when I'm mad. I'll get you mad too. And the other thing with teens is that they learn very quickly that when they're obnoxious, we leave them alone. So we may argue and yell at them, but we expect less of them. So it's unpleasant to us to have to get the kid to empty the dishwasher or come with us on a family errand or things like that. So we just like, you know what, skip it. You don't have to come. And that's what the kid wants. So the unpleasant behavior is then reinforced by us letting them stay home or get out of something that they don't really want to do in the first place. And so I think for like what you were saying, it is very freeing for parents not to have to address every obnoxious behavior in their teens. Immediately, even if the behavior doesn't go away, you feel better. You feel lighter. You feel just like, wow, I can actually be and not have to address that. That's amazing. And also, I think that we should allow teens to feel their feelings. You know, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're moody. Sometimes I am too. And nothing is worse when you're in a bad mood than someone trying to talk you out of it or tell you why you shouldn't be in a bad mood, you know, or cheer up. So just let them be. And sometimes I have a teenage daughter who was moody before the teen years. And over time, I have kind of learned when I see her that way, that's just my cue to back off, to just don't push the buttons on her because it's just going to spiral out of control. So, you know, ignoring some of their behavior until you can see that their mood has changed, still requiring them to do the things that we want, like empty the dishwasher. I'm going to ignore all the whining and complaining about it, but you still have to do it. So immediately I'm still getting what I want done, but it's a lot more pleasant because I don't have to deal with the whining and complaining. And when the kid realizes that whining and complaining doesn't get them out of emptying the dishwasher, they're going to stop. They don't want to, you know, why bother with it if it doesn't get me out of something? So I think that it can really free up parents and take some of the burden off. And also, you know, kids are starting in their teen years are starting to like move out of the nest. You know, their friends are becoming more important. You know, their summer activities and their after school program and school is really where their heart is. And it's a shame when in that exact moment, the relationship with the parent also frays, because it's great when the kid can get out, but then still has a strong connection at home. And so sometimes ignoring some of that annoying behavior, attention-seeking or provoking behavior can actually improve the relationship and can really keep a solid foundation so that the kid can stray, but then come back and have a strong connection before they go off to college or, you know, work or whatever it may be.
Oh, absolutely. And I also find I liked your part about how you talk about then re-engage. So if they're being kind of, you know, they have kind of a bad attitude as they're unloading the dishwasher or whatever they're doing, you ignore that. But then once they're, you know, talking again and talkative, you just re-engage and just act like that surliness didn't happen. And you're right. It just, then you feel like the relationship is fine. But if you get into it, like have a better attitude while you're unloading the dishwasher, that's not going to get anywhere because you're not going to actually change their attitude. You're just going to end up getting in an argument about it.
I think parents say that kind of stuff because it makes them feel better. It's like we want to be the top dog. You know, we want to be able to say, like, have the last word and you know, do it, but do it with a smile. And really doesn't matter. Just do it. You know, just empty the dishwasher. And then as soon as you're done, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to really go out of my way because that's one less thing I have to do. And I truly appreciate it. And I don't want to take it for granted like I wouldn't with my partner or my friend. I'm going to say thank you to my kid just the same. And then exactly, I'm going to re-engage them like that, whining, complaining didn't happen. But what's amazing is over time, and not even a long time, but pretty quickly, the dynamic changes because kids see that kind of behavior doesn't get them anywhere. They want to stay out and have a late curfew and you say no, and then they say why, and you explain why. And then they realize all that whining, complaining after that doesn't get them anything. They're not going to bother anymore. And it just over a couple of times of trying, now they don't even bother. They ask, you answer, they move on. Everything's
right. Yeah, it's funny. On page 176 of your book, you have a whole thing about your how much sleep does your child need? And it was fun because I actually got to show that to my kids because one of the things that I get a lot from I've always thought, and I just know how important sleep and, proper nutrition and exercise are to just our well-being. And so I've always insisted on my kids getting enough sleep. And they claim that none of their friends have to go to sleep or turn off their phones or anything. And I know this is not true. But that's one of those areas where you just have to make it a non-negotiable because they will whine and argue and try to negotiate to the extreme on things like screen time and sleep. And that's one of those things that I think as a parent, I think a lot of parents have given up because of their whining. I think they've won. The kids have kind of,
totally.
And it's really too bad because if it's true what my kids are telling me, which is that their friends are, have their devices in their rooms and don't ever turn them off and are up until 11 o'clock on school nights, then, and I'm sure that's an exaggeration and there's a lot of parents who like me, but it is a battle because I have, for every couple weeks, one or other of my kids will, complain and about it. And like you said, I've just stood firm and just like, this is how we do it here. Once you're in college, you'll have to self-regulate on these things. But for now, this is how we do it.
Yeah. I actually think your kids are probably not that far off it's actually like an epidemic of kids not getting enough sleep for a variety of reasons. Very many of them have devices in their room, and they are up all night at 13, 14, 15, 16, texting and Snapchatting and doing all the stuff while their parents are asleep. So they're chronically overtired. And then they're also getting a lot of homework. They have a lot of after-school activities, so they're just getting to bed much later than is recommended. And over time, these kids are really chronically overtired, and that can account for a lot of mood issues. It can account for academic performance, depression, lots of issues for kids just not getting an extra hour or two of sleep. And you think, well, what's an extra hour? But actually, it's a lot if you compound that every single day over time, and they can't catch up on the weekends. It just doesn't work that way. So I am very firm about bedtime and getting kids the right amounts of sleep. I am 100% with you on being non-negotiable about any devices in the room. And my husband and I do the exact same. There's no devices in our room, and there's no amount of whining and complaining but so-and-so is allowed, but I need it for my alarm clock. There's nothing my kid can say that will let me have them keep their devices in their room, because I know exactly what's happening on them. And nothing good is happening at 3 a.m. on their phones.
Absolutely not. That. Yeah. So in here you say between 13 and 21 years at the bottom of your chart, total sleep need 9 hours. And you say most teens get less than 7 hours of sleep. Keep computers and cell phones out of the bedrooms. So of course I highlighted that and was just, please, parents, listen to this, because it's one of those things that, I mean, everyone has their own things that are important to them, but just this sleep thing for kids is so important. I wish people would all kind of hear this message and make it one of the non-negotiable things with their kids, because it really would improve so many things for all of us on this battle. Okay, so just really quick, I know we don't have too much more time, but tell me about, were you ever a camper, or do you have any experience with summer camp?
I live for camp. I was a camper, I was a counselor, I was a camp social worker, and a camp director. I love camp. I send my kids to camp. I'm a big believer in the wide variety of benefits for camp. And actually, my sister and I joke all the time, like, oh, I can do this because I went to camp. Like I can make a fire. I can still sail, which amazes me, like that I can actually sail and get my boat back in the ocean. And I learned that on a lake at summer camp. Like I absolutely adore camp.
Oh, well, I just love that. See, again, when I heard, I actually went to your website after I got your book and saw that the article that was up was about photo posting, which I really laughed about a lot, because it's so true that in this era of really wanting to be so involved, it's kind of crazy, the whole camp photo situation.
Oh my gosh. So, my daughter went to sleepaway camp and they posted photos in dribs and drabs all day long. And I literally didn't leave my computer. I was very homesick for her, which is funny because she could be at my mother's house for a week. I wouldn't even think two things about it, but it was like, it was the separation that I didn't know what she was doing when, and it was a miserable time. And now my son goes to a different camp, and they didn't post a single picture at all for 2 weeks, not one thing. It was unbelievable. I was so happy my son was having a good time. I could hear from them if I needed to, but I didn't have to see everything. And then when my son came home, all his stories were fresh. I didn't know what he made. I didn't know what he did. It was like he was so excited to tell me everything, and I wasn't like, yeah, I saw the picture. So I had two totally different experiences, and even though I would have never chosen to not get a picture, now I would.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I mean, it's funny because from the camp perspective, it's a lot of work to make sure we get photos of everybody so that parents can see their kids often. And it's, you can never win, because most parents, all they want to see is their own kids. They don't really want to go through all these hundreds of photos of other people's kids. So it's an interesting, but what I've found is it's mostly a first year parent phenomenon. Like the first year their kids at camp, they spend all that time. And then after that, they might check occasionally, but a lot of them go on their own vacations and kind of figure out that it's not necessary to see every moment of their kid's day. But I thought that was a really great thing. But thanks for that great endorsement about camp. It's such an important thing. And it's great to tell more people about how good camp experiences are for kids and how they have an impact lifelong on things that we end up doing and hobbies that, we keep into adulthood and everything. So that's fabulous. So Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. Before we sign off, I want to make sure you tell everyone where they can find you. I enjoyed listening to the podcast, The Sports Parent, that you do with your husband. Can you just tell us about where people can find you and your book?
Sure. So my book is available in bookstores and on Amazon. And you can find me at thefamilycoach.com and also on Facebook and Twitter at The Family Coach.
Awesome. And can you just talk a minute about the podcast you do with your husband?
Yeah. So my husband's a sports writer, and obviously I work in parenting. And so we wanted to do a podcast called The Sports Parent where, you know, it's not really just about sports and parenting, but I think that so much of our lives can be related back to what's going on the playground and on the field. So we talk about all kinds of topics that are either in the news or going on for our kids or things we see. Sometimes we have guests. We've had some amazing guests, and sometimes it's just the two of us. But it's our fun way of getting together and talking about the issues that are going on for kids and parents relating to sports and or anything to do with parenting.
Well, I loved your banter. I listened to an episode and just thought it was great. And it's a topic that I think about a lot just because I feel like in a lot of families, the sports are the highest priority. And if you look at it in terms of time commitment, a lot of families revolve around one child or more children's sports. And so it's just an interesting era that we're in right now of what an emphasis families are putting on their kids' sports.
Yeah, I think it's to the detriment of other things. You know, there's an opportunity cost. So, you know, we talk a lot about that.
Yeah, so which is great. So anyway, I highly recommend that as well. Catherine, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really enjoyed reading your book and learning more about you, and we'll definitely keep following your work and telling people about your great book. Like I said, I recommend it, like you said, from ages 2 to 21, maybe even beyond, because when you think about even adults who do annoying behaviors, the more it's kind of a good way to go through life. It's a lot less stressful to just learn to tune out the things that just were not, behaviors that bother us. Maybe will go away faster if we just ignore them and maybe praise more the things we like.
Absolutely. I have friends keep calling, you should do one for partners and spouses. You should do one for bosses. You should do it's like endless. I'm like, that's a great idea. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's
funny.
So fun. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope we can connect in person at some point because it would be fun to get together and talk about more of these things. I really feel like we're on the same page with a lot of our parenting ideas.
I think so too. Thank you so much for having me.
I so enjoyed talking with Catherine in this episode of the podcast, and I will definitely be using her ideas in both my own family and in our counselor training next summer for camp. For notes and links that we talked about during the podcast, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 14. I'll leave you today with a quote from the Dalai Lama, which I think goes along with what Catherine and I were talking about. Do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace.